All right. And welcome to everybody that is joining us right now. I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And before I even get started on today's very sensitive topic, I want to first wish a very happy birthday to my podcast co host, one of my close friends, and the woman who's responsible for helping pull this panel together today, Miss Des Thomas. Happy birthday, sweet friend.
Thank you. I'm so excited. Seems like a way more good way to spend my birthday, helping other people other than sitting at the beach and margaritas. I think I like this one better. We'll see what I feel like after it.
There's still time. There's still time to go to the beach.
If you could finish this and go straight for the margaritas, I'd be all for that. So let's talk a bit about today's topic, which is laid off. Now what? What do we do? Well, according to Crunchbase, at least 48,278, I want to be specific because those are individuals we're talking about, at US-based tech companies have lost their jobs so far this year. That's just a US number. That's not even when I look at global companies like Microsoft, Google, Tesla, or Cisco with their layoffs. So whether you're currently facing a layoff, or you're concerned about potential job cuts at your company, it's essential to remember that you're not alone in this. Many of us have been there. We've got t-shirts, hats, and unemployment checks to prove it. And today we're going to talk about strategies for managing the emotional impacts of the layoff. There are things you need to do to prepare yourself. How do you practically prepare for something you don't know is going to happen before it happens? And then ultimately, how do you turn a challenging situation into an opportunity for growth and new beginnings? But the number one thing, if you're a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is don't panic. Keep your towel with you at all times. So now let me open our panel and allow our guests to introduce themselves. First, I would like Cass Cooper from CRN to introduce herself.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share because emotional intelligence and self-care is something that's very important and near and dear to me. But as I said, as was introduced, I am Cass Cooper. I have she, her pronouns. I am a columnist for inclusive leadership at CRN, a new column. So if you're not following us, I would love to learn more about where we can find you, and you can find us on crn.com. I sit in the DFW area. I arrived at this role post layoff. So I'm very familiar with losing your job. I lost my job during the pandemic, like so many people. So I'm excited to share my experience and learn from everybody else here as well.
All right, Jeff, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jeff Dryle. I'm a manager of a team of solutions engineers at ScalePad, and I saw the topic and I thought that somebody as a somewhat new to the leadership game thought maybe I could contribute a little bit from an interesting perspective. Further, I've been laid off, I'll call it a couple of times over the years in my career. And, I can kind of talk a little bit about how I might have actually inadvertently prepared for it without knowing, kind of like Karate Kidded myself. I was waxing on and waxing off and didn't realize I turned into a karate master as a result of it. So it prepared me for multiple experiences throughout my career. And further, I'm just happy to be here.
Fantastic. Dr. Renee.
Well, thank you for having me. Renee Pizarro, and I have been in the channel for about 30 years. And always in tech. My mother was in tech for 25 years. My husband for almost 20. Both of them had gotten laid off at different times in their career. And I have laid people off as well as been laid off myself as recently as August of last year. And I've studied the topic a lot from different perspectives. I am honored to be here and hope to add a ton of value.
All righty. And last but not least, birthday girl.
Desiree Thomas. Hi, everyone. I've been on the channel for about 8-9 years, give or take here. I moved into technology with this like amazing conversation in my head where coming from Calgary, Alberta, oil and gas, I didn't want to work in oil and gas and get laid off every 6 months. And so I remember stating several times over the last 8 years that moving into tech was the best thing I ever do because it made sure that I would always have a job. And then it was like, oops, Des, you said that too many times and then you got laid off. And then I thought it was going to be easy. And then it wasn't easy. And all of a sudden it was 10 months later. And I was like, a lot of amazing projects and a lot of doors opened and a lot of great conversations, which I'm sure is a part of this. But there's a lot of moments that I was like, wow, this is really a really big, stressful lot of things. And so that's why I was excited to have this conversation. I'm so glad that we can all participate. And I think between all of us, we've got some maybe tools, tips, and tricks that might help the people that are listening.
So it's interesting. Each one of you said, thank you. I'm excited. I look forward to this conversation. But I can guarantee that no one is excited, looking forward to, or happy about a layoff or being laid off. It is gut wrenching. And so let's get to the hardest part of it. Renee, you and I were talking about this ahead of time. There is this funny thing where somebody will say, I lost my job. You didn't lose it. It was taken from you. You had a job. You liked your job. You know where that job still is. It just isn't yours. You didn't lose it. So there is a grief that comes along with that change in life, whether we want to call it a job loss or a job displacement, however you frame it, it's still a loss. What can we do to accept that grief?
Who wants to start?
Well, I was letting you
going
start.
to you, Dr. Renee. So, I mean, I have a lot to say about grief, but go ahead. Yeah.
Me too. But so the first thing is you should let yourself feel all the feelings, right? If you try to bury them or skip through them, that doesn't work very well. And it is very normal to feel like there's something wrong with you, like, what did I do? And whatever, right? And go through it. But I have a 24-hour rule, right? Is you feel very deeply everything you're going to feel. And then at 24 hours, you pick yourself up and you move on, right? Particularly in tech, I've learned that every day could be your last day. That's true for life as well, by the way, right? And you should always be thinking about how you prepare for someone to decide that, hey, we don't have enough money for you anymore, or we're going to reorganize that entire division, or whatever it might be, right? And the other thing that's interesting about our industry is in very many, and more often than not, it is absolutely nothing to do with you, what you bring to to the table, your gifts, your experience. And that's important for people to understand. Now, sometimes it is you, but often it is not, right?
Yeah.
All right, Cass, add your words in there.
Yeah, I like the idea of feel all the feelings, right? And I think part of that is I'm going to push back on the 24-hour thing because I think that's good initially. I think that's great initially because I think there is some value to acting quickly, right? Reach out to your network, be able to, like lean on other people, maybe not announce on LinkedIn, but maybe send some private messages and that kind of thing so that you can remain in community. Because I think that's the biggest thing when we go through a change like that, is you go from, you have meetings and you're seeing people every day, and then that severance of community can be really impactful to you individually. So yeah, within that first 24 hours, for sure. I also think that the grieving process is cyclical in so many ways. If you've ever lost someone close to you, grieving a relationship or something like that, this is a very similar thing, and it impacts your livelihood. And so feeling like that is going to be something that is like, it's going to reoccur, right? There's going to be times where you're like, oh man, I should have done, or I wish I would have, or I don't have access to, and what happened to that person's phone number that I needed because I feel like they were so good in my network, right? I think understanding that those things are going to ebb and flow is a natural part of it. I would also say understand that a lot of it may feel personal, but these are institutions that are systemic, and these are things that are a lot of times outside of your individual control. The business made a decision to reduce in size. It wasn't that you are a negative impact on the business, and like not internalizing that, I think is so powerful and will help you move through that grief cycle.
I called it forced change.
Ooh,
There's like
good.
only so much like change in your life that like happens. Like, yeah, you get married or divorced, you have kids or you don't have kids, you maybe move houses, move to a different city. All of those things like literally just change everything around you. Having a job, getting a new job, another massive change that changes your community, it changes your network, it's an entire different thing. And so forced change, all of a sudden you get laid off and you weren't prepared, you're not mentally, didn't think about it. And I love the Dr. Renee 24 hours. If you give me any tools to actually make that happen in 24 hours, because like I was like ups and downs for like weeks. I would be like, forced change, doors open, everything's exciting, summer off 2023. This is going to be amazing, to the wait, I still don't have a job and now I'm really bored and I've got like 30 projects that I'm doing that are all fantastic and amazing, but also like, what am I doing with my life? Does anyone like me anymore? I thought I had value. Now I don't have any value, and like ups and downs and ups and downs.
Yeah. It doesn't mean, by the way, and I'll later explain it, but it doesn't mean in the 24 hours you're over it and you're done.
Right.
But yes, we'll get into it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeff, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I like the term force changed, and I feel like the follow-up from that point for me had a lot to do with what I'll call retrospective reflection. So idea being that, hey, you know, I did a lot of stuff in that job, maybe of a higher value than I might perceive at the time. So when I go back and think about all the projects I delivered on, the work that I did, the people I helped, you know, just across the board while I was in that job, taking the time to really document and understand, wow, you know, I did a lot of cool things in that job, and I'm going to leverage that understanding for my next move. So I just found, for me, every time it happened to me, it was, well, what was I doing? And what do you know? It actually turns out it was some pretty cool stuff that people want to pay for. So just kind of, you know, understanding that and building up your sort of mental state in that regard. Remember, like you said, it wasn't you 9 times out of 10. You were doing a great job. Now let's write that down, all the stuff that we did, so we can leverage that for the next step moving forward.
Yeah. And I think that takes a certain level of maturity, right? I don't think, you know, when I was laid off in my 20s, my reaction was much different than when I was laid off at 40, right? So I think it's one of those, and I know you're thinking, I'm just so young looking, but anyway.
I was thinking that.
No, I think that, you know, if I could give some advice to people who maybe are like earlier in their career, realize that your career is going to take a lot of different journeys and a lot of different spaces, and it's not necessarily rejection, it's redirection, right? It's trying to find a way to make life is giving you an opportunity to find your way within it, right? You're not being rejected from what you thought. And I think in my 20s, I definitely felt like there was something wrong with me and what could I have done differently? This person did not work as hard as me and they still have a job, you know, and what does that mean? And a lot of internalization of that. But when I got laid off this time, I used it as an opportunity to say, what are the things that I actually want to be doing with the next part of my life? And what are the things that I could not do because I was in a job that I liked, but I didn't love? Let me find the thing that I loved and I ended up going back to school and changing careers almost entirely. And I think that is so valuable. It gives you an opportunity to say like, okay, hey, I didn't like this part of my job and I'm going to use those skills to get to the next thing. Right.
Yeah. I want to share 2 key things, right? The first thing is, if you're not preparing, you're repairing, right? So don't wait until you lose the job, right, to update your resume. I would always, one of the things I did was onboard a lot of early career people into the organization through inside sales. And there was a lot of anxiety about the layoffs because there's always been, and the earlier generation is a lot more aware of all the different layoffs, and they're like, oh my God, what do I do? And always have your resume ready, always be building your network, always be taking some kind of course or something that's setting you apart, that's you're teaching, and you're teaching yourself and you're growing. And that's a key element to your ability to bounce back. The other thing, and I see this more in, I would say, generations before the millennials, they tie their identity and their value to their work and to the title that the company gives them. And when a layoff occurs, their sense of self-worth plummets.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't see it as much with the millennials and the zillennials, right? They're a lot more invested in multiple things, and they tie their identity and self-worth to other things outside of work. And that's, I think, something we should learn from that generation.
So you said something important, which is if you're not repairing or not preparing, you're repairing.
Correct.
And I think about a manager that I had who every 6 months, when we came in for our employee review at this company, it was a Fortune 500, we had to come in with a brand new resume, meaning we had to show our updated resume every 6 months, because her thought was you should always have 2 resumes. One to use internally for those skills that you know are only valued internal to that company. They're very specific to that organization. And the other one externally. What if something amazing happens and you find that next job and you want to be ready to apply for it? I don't see people taking the time to update their resumes or updating their LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Really easy, as frequently as you can. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, if we can, some of those strategies for what can you be doing before it happens. And Jeff, if I could start with you, if you could just give one piece of advice, what would you say to people to be ready before it happens?
Yeah. I think I similar to what I said earlier, I stumbled across the fact that I was kind of doing it without knowing. And then later on in my, call it 30s and 40s, that I noticed it as a conscious effort. And that has a lot to do with paying attention to everything else that I possibly can that's happening around me within the company. So as an individual contributor in solutions engineering or sales or tech support or success, I would make a point to understand why. Why are there these different departments? What are the other people in this company doing all day? What is their job? Why is it important that they have a job and what they're doing? What's product management? What's product marketing? How does that work? And just kind of working to have a broader understanding of the inner workings of a given organization that I'm an individual contributor for, I really think expanded my perspective of potential opportunity should I end up in a forced change situation, right? So don't stay locked in what you do all day. Kathleen, you mentioned always be learning, taking courses. I think it's the same sentiment, right? You kind of just got to be mentally aware and interested and innately curious of anything that's going on that you can get access to and understand and learn. And I think that's really how I personally went from a very long, lucrative sales career into solutions engineering, because I was very curious about that side of the business and how that works and how that role interoperates with all the other roles within a given organization. So yeah, just always be aware, be curious, understand why people are doing the things around you, and then you'll just by nature expand your horizons and depth of curiosity.
So Cass, what's your one thing?
Oh man, I mean, I piggyback on all of what everyone's saying. I think the biggest thing is, and Dr. Renee said it, I'm going to say it in millennial speak. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And I think the only constant really is change. So kind of ebb and flow with that. I think one pragmatic thing also is find a way to, while you have the job, to live below your means, so that you don't. So when things like that happen, you have a little bit of a seed set aside. Now I know, like, my generation is not as well versed. We've got some very real financial hurdles that we're trying to overcome. We don't buy houses in the same way that other generations do. We've got some things that we are working through, be it student loans, et cetera, forever and ever. But I think being able to be ready for a financial change, and thinking through that, when you start seeing kind of the writing on your roles, see where you can scale back a little bit. And I'm not talking like just don't get a coffee because people are going to drink coffee. I'm talking like, maybe you like buy a cookbook and meal plan, right? That'll save you some money. You're not eating out as much. Are there ways that you can conserve energy in your home? Like, can you even like some people, sharing plans, right? Like sharing cell phone plans with your friends, like that's a cost savings. Like find creative ways to live a little bit below your means so you can stack a little cash on the side. So if something does happen, you're not just relying on a severance, which I know we're going to get to, but you have some ability to do that. I think also, as someone who lives with hidden illness, understanding your healthcare benefits is a huge thing. You got to understand that when you're in the job, not waiting until you're not in the job. But yeah, I think staying ready in those ways will help with the stress that comes if something happens and you're into a forced change.
Well, now, Des, I was lucky with you because you were ready to jump into projects. That was your thing. And it turned into be a glorious partnership. But what is your one thing for people as they see the writing on the wall?
Of course, I'm going to give you two because I got to give you two. But so you mentioned the projects. I think the most important thing, the only reason why the projects that I was able to pick up, and this is why these two things fall in line, is because of the community and the network that I've been spent the last 10 years and longer, of course, but specifically in this industry building. I learned really young, like soon as I started, one of the first things that was ever said to me is that there's a handful of people in this industry, and if they know you, they'll speak your name in other rooms. And I just wanted to grow that and grow that. So I wanted to be so that way, if and when anything happened, promotions, jobs, or opportunities, or projects, fun projects, I'm always in for a fun project, that someone was speaking my name in a room being like, Des would be interested in that, you should talk to her. So that was really helpful because I was able to keep my mindset of being like, hey, I'm in a position where my face and being in front of people is important, and now that's been taken away from me. So how do I keep that up? And that's where the networking and then putting myself out there to do projects was so powerful and so important. And then the other side of that is, I just wish I knew this when I was younger, but like for me, and this falls along what Jeff was saying, like learning what you can do, learning more things. I call job work paid education. I think it's important to be like, this is paid education. You're getting paid to learn. So how much can you learn? But then the important part is not only how much can you learn, what are those skills and how can they be standalone, and how can those skills make you money otherwise. So as an example, I'm really good at networking and channel and stuff. So I was able to pick up fractional channel chief work. That is amazing. I was able to sit down with businesses and use my sales skills to be like, hey, this is what you should be doing with your sales teams, or insert many other of the different projects that I picked up. But with that opportunity and being able to like, and it took a while to figure it out, but with that opportunity, I was able to be like, okay, I can make $500 here, $1,000 here, I can do a 2-month contract here. And even though I still really wanted a full-time job, that was really helpful. And then it also has put me in the mindset of, okay, what does retirement look like? And how do I take these skills? And also when hopping to a new job, can I take these skills with me in the new job and these projects at the same time? So now I have reoccurring revenue happening in the back end, but I'm also working full-time for a job. And like, I think that's going to be how, if this ever happens again, I'll be setting myself up to protect myself.
God, I love what you just said, and I'm going to jump in real quick because I want to make sure we don't lose it. It's brilliant, right? You have to think of yourself as a product, and how do you create multiple streams of revenue for yourself? Passive revenue, other forms of active revenue, fractional work is fantastic. It's not for everybody because not everybody has the ability to really focus and organize themselves into different projects. But volunteering at groups like Cass and I met through a diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of ERG and work, and diversify your network. Don't just stay within the same. My mom had pancreatic cancer, so I worked a lot with the pancreatic cancer organization, and they're called the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. And I met a lot of people through that experience. So I think you really have to think about yourself as a product, and then how are these different streams of revenue that you can or things that you can monetize, right? Some things you can't, like the PanCan organization was truly, something you're doing for charity and whatnot. But there's many ways people will pay you for your time, for your knowledge, for your contacts, right? How many people don't get hired in the channel because of their Rolodex? That has value, but we're not used to thinking of it that way. So
What's a Rolodex for the younger crowd?
yeah.
Oh yeah, right.
Cass, can you translate that into millennial speak for me?
Your address book, your contact list,
Contact list.
Yeah.
yes, your Instagram DMs. That's
There
what.
you go.
So one of the things that I've noticed, a great event that's happening at many of these large events, is something called the ChannelWise Coaching Cafe. And for those of you who have not been to the Coaching Cafe, this is a fantastic resource. It is run by Catherine Rose of ChannelWise,
Yes.
the CEO there. And the Coaching Cafe is a great place, whether you're in a current role at a company or if you are looking to build those additional revenue streams. I've done it. Des, I know you've participated in it, as has Trevor. Many people that I know are currently participating in it, either through their businesses or as independent freelancers. And what a great opportunity to share that knowledge and not feel like you've been shelved. Again, it adds to that self-worth. So we've prepared now as best we can for what we might see coming. The day is here. A package is put in front of us. We all know the golden rule. Don't sign anything. Falls under that 24-hour rule, right? For 24 hours, I'm signing nothing. I don't care what they say. They're going to hold over your head for 24 hours. Just breathe. Hold on to your towel. Don't panic. When we get to the other side of it, it's now time to decide what that severance package looks like. You have the option to negotiate a different package. You may know what other people have received in their packages. In the United States, there is now a rule from the National Labor Board that prevents companies from putting a gag order on you as it relates to the terms of packages, so you can understand what other packages have been given in the past. But no, Cass said it earlier, this is a business decision, and the funds that were available for others may not be available when it's your turn. So other than negotiating those packages and really understanding those medical benefits, COBRA and what that looks like, or how long you are covered underneath your company's insurance plan during the time of the severance package, I'm going to start with you, Des. What else would you tell people to think of?
I didn't know negotiating was a thing in the first place. So you guys maybe should have had this conversation when I got laid off. My conversation ended up being like, and then not even knowing what to say. Let me know what the next steps are forward. And then I got held on a call where he kept on saying stuff to me, and I was like, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm just gonna pass on this question, because that is one question that I wish I was part of this. I did not realize negotiating was an option. I
think that's the thing that, like, in retrospect, I did know negotiating was an option, but the sign nothing for 24 hours. Because I was in a position, because like I said, I got let go during the pandemic, and so I was in a position where it was like, I'm just gonna ride this out until, because I knew that it was coming, right? Like, I worked in an events company, no one was having meetings, it was a non-thing. So I think I was so almost like relieved to like have it finally happen that I was like, okay, cool. Where do you need me to sign? Where do I send my computer? I was just so like, okay, ready to move on to the next thing, because I knew it was happening. So I think I did negotiate on the call, and got a little bit, but it was the not sign anything. I wish I would have known that because of the health benefits issue that I had later. And so I think that's the biggest thing is the don't sign it. Like, I just wish I would have known that. And I think asking questions, I think always a big thing. Like Jeff said, be curious. And like, there's no rush. They took a while to come to this decision, and they thought through who needed to go. They had a timeline. They knew what day that they were going to, announce, like, all these. They have a press release. They got all sorts of things in the back end. So why do I have to now feel rushed? I'm not going to rush. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to take my 24 hours. I'm going to take a weekend, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go drink my margarita, have a beer, sit on my porch, and just breathe a second, and then come up with the next plan. Like, there's no rush.
And that's it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, because you got me thinking, right? And I've seen a lot of shenanigans over the years, right? Either by employer, but also by employee, right? And so if you get the laid off package and you review it, and you have to make a decision. Does it make sense to bother negotiating this to potentially, I don't know, create a bigger problem? Or is it something that I'm satisfied with, that I feel like I can work with and is acceptable in my brain? Because we've all seen employees come in and go, oh, I've been laid off. Great. Now I'm going to call a lawyer. Now I'm going to do everything that I possibly can to screw over that employer and get as much out of them as I possibly can. I'm actually highly against that, especially if you are in a very tightly knit industry. I mean, before this meeting started, Kathleen and I both realized that we've probably known the same people over the past 25, 30 years. And, we've never directly crossed paths before. So you never know what happens. And all it takes is one person to say the wrong thing about you in a space that could jeopardize your potential opportunity. So, it's one thing to consider the negotiation and consider the time to sign, which makes sense because you don't want to make an emotional decision. You want to base it on in well thought out, facts. And is it worth it squeezing a couple more grand out of them to put them through this and go back and forth? And most of the time, it's not. I like to believe that most of the time the employer is hoping to do the right thing, and as the employer, now ex-employee, you should also do the right thing and believe that if what you're provided with is to you in your heart an acceptable arrangement, don't go and try to squeeze more out of the employer just for the sake of it, because you never know where that's going to lead. Ideally, you want to, just as you want to leave smoothly and sail off into the night and move on to the next phase of your life, so does the employer, right? So unless it's something they're just, you get nothing, get out of here, right? There's obviously a spectrum there, mind you, but always consider that. Is it worth it? Is it good enough? Is 6 months of additional health coverage going to cut it? Or should I ask for a year, or, whatever the numbers are? Just, always keep that in the back of your mind, right? When you want to push for that. If that
I
makes
think
sense.
the one thing I would caveat that with, Jeff, is some of that, I wouldn't be me if I didn't talk about the equity issue.
Yes.
Right? So I think some of that, for some of us who, know that statistically we get lowballed, for lack of a better term, the negotiation piece is huge, because I realized after I'm not going to say lost my job, because we changed that. After I was redirected, I was already earning less than what my counters were. And so, and when I looked at like what I could have been making and what I was actually being paid, I did feel a way. And then that's when I realized, like, no, if this ever happens to me again, I'm going to like ask bigger questions and negotiate around that, because the impact is different from before. Now, I didn't get like thousands of dollars more, right? It was more of like, I really was hoping for this number because I knew what my number would be to sustain me for like the next 3 months. But I also realized that, like, they probably were already underpaying me because I am a Black woman, and that's just statistically likely.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that to me is something that for some people who are watching and listening, you just are automatically aware of in a different way. And as women, we tend not to, we just accept. And I think for women, it's important to say, like, I'm not going to accept my first offer. I'm just not going to.
I want to circle on two things that all of you have touched on. And first, the first one, the heart of the 24-hour rule is to not make permanent decisions on temporary emotions. And usually, when you give yourself 24 hours, physiologically, you have time to process the fight or flight response and all the chemical responses that happen in your body that you're not even aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the heart of that, right? The second thing is exactly what Cass just said. Know your number. There are so many people that do not know what they would need to live on for even the month, never mind 3 months, which is, and also they don't know their number when they're negotiating their salary. And that goes to, as women and as women of color or, Hispanic women, we are usually underpaid a good 5, 10, 20, 30% less, right? But if you've done your homework and you know your number, when you're going into a negotiation of any kind, now you're prepared,
Yeah.
right? Brilliant, Cass. Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
Jeff, you said something interesting. We started off this call discovering we know some of the same people, but don't quite remember where we've met before or how we've met before. So it goes to those networking systems, right? Before I get laid off, when I get laid off, if I never get laid off, what is the importance of that support system, that networking system to have in place? We all know, especially for those listening today, that the IT channel community is a small community. Nobody ever leaves channels. You just change what company you're with. We've been saying that since I entered the channel literally in 1951. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to go that was way over exaggerated, but we have been saying that for a long time. I myself have worked in 5 different channel companies. So Jeff, what would you say about the importance of the network?
Well, it's like the little thing you just said there, right? You very well, somebody could, your boss you had could be your boss again. This is the third time I've worked for our CEO across different companies. Technically fourth. You'll have to ask him what the fourth one was. I've managed to in my recent experience of hiring people, leveraged a network to build a pretty cool team of solutions engineers here. So, becoming empowered myself to actually be able to grant opportunities to others and doing that within my network to a degree, right? Also for others I've helped uplift, just recently at a huge event last week or 2 weeks, I forget now when it was so long ago, running into old friends who were working on new opportunities of their own and connecting them with others that I know in the industry and to help them elevate their own opportunity. It's because you never know where you can help. And I countless times I'm sure I've made random introductions over the years that have grown and permeated into something bigger and better for folks around me that I wouldn't even be a part of. I'll give another quick example. Years ago, after one of my layoffs, I flew down to ChannelCon on my own dollar. Went to the event as a guy looking for a job, and I came out of there on, when I used to use paper, written on paper, all the leads that I had collected as essentially job opportunities, and they were well into the double digits, right? 15 to 20 completely separate job opportunities that I could have literally plucked from, all because of the network that I had grown and developed and nurtured in my time in the channel.
I'm gonna be okay. So I got laid off and I was like, it's cool. My network is huge. I can figure this out. And then the channel in the last little bit has been weird. And I was getting offers for jobs and thank you for everyone who ever offered me a job. And I know that I did turn down jobs that I wasn't interested in. I didn't want to burn any companies. So I didn't want to take a job that I knew that I wouldn't be happy with in 6 months, a year.
Correct.
You can't burn the channel. Once again, you can't burn the channel. But there was this really hard moment there for me where I found that when I wasn't getting jobs for my network and I was applying for jobs and I wasn't even getting callbacks, and I was like, all my coaches, all my mentors, all my bosses I've ever worked with have all said they'd hire me again. People I've worked with have said, Des, you've done a good job. And I'm like, I can't even get an interview without my network. And then what broke my heart, there was a person that I know who got laid off, and she was applying for jobs, but she didn't want to use her network. She only wanted to apply cold because she felt that she would be putting people out to use. And when I found it was too late for me to do anything. But when I found out about it, I was like, I literally cannot get an interview without my network in positions that I would be amazing at, but I've never but there's people that don't understand that the network is that important. You literally, people will reach out and say, Des, you're connected with so-and-so on LinkedIn. Can you see if they would be willing to do a warm introduction? Yes, 100%. And I did the same thing Jeff did. I went to not having a job, went to six different channel events, not having jobs, because I was like, no, I have to be in front of people. I have to try to be on stage. I have to do all of the things so that way people know who I am, and that way the conversation is keep on happening. But I think it's so imperative that people feel comfortable to lean on their network, because I would not be in the exact same place if it wasn't for my network.
Same.
I love the idea, though, also of one of my Karen Fazio, who we all probably know on some level. One thing she says is give two, ask one, right? So I think the benefit of having a strong network is that you will give more probably than what you are willing to take. And so I think what I would hypothesize is that the person that you, I don't know them, but maybe they didn't feel comfortable because they hadn't given to their network as much as they were willing to take. And I think being able to just comment on people's posts, or just say, giving a text and saying, hey, I heard what happened, or, I'm checking in, not necessarily immediately, but maybe a month later, and say, you're on my mind. I was just hoping that this, that you're good. And maintaining those connections, that's giving more than you're taking. And then when it becomes your turn to make an ask, it makes it a little bit easier because you've built a genuine relationship. There's a connection there. And it's not just about I need, it's about I can also provide. And maybe it's not a job necessarily. Maybe it's just I'm working on a story for CRN and I need, access to this person. Can you help me, talk with them, right? That can be an easy thing. I mean, I literally have met all of you because I commented on someone else's post about layoffs, right?
Same. Why I'm here.
Asking, I was like, oh, I agree with what they're saying. I feel this very deeply. So, and then Des and I started talking, it happens organically in a very real way. But now I have 4 new connections that I didn't have, all because I was just being kind online.
Well, I'll tell you,
I am a massive believer of the network. And Jeff, I'm going to let you go in 2 seconds, but it's very critical. And I mean this. Network with your network all the time. Don't just wait until you need them. You can simply give that thumbs up or that clap or that insightful emoticon when you're looking at someone's article. Put a quick comment. Send them a DM. It is not that hard to stay connected to people. If we learned anything during that time of the pandemic, our human connections are worth so much more than we value them at. Yeah. And Jeff, with that, take over.
Well, I was just going to mention how it's funny how my wife makes fun of me because I don't really do anything with social media at all other than LinkedIn. And, she's on all the other platforms and LinkedIn, but never really got it. It was like, oh, she actually said LinkedIn's for old people. And I said, well, I know. That's why I'm there. But she and then when she started to see what I do with it and the network I've built up over the years, she's like, okay, now I understand. So I have historically and traditionally used social media specifically for business networking purposes, way more than anything else.
I want to piggyback off of that, Jeff, right? One of my many jobs at the company that I was at was actually building the channel and getting new channel partners enrolled into our company and selling our products and growing. And I had 7,000 partners in the US that had contracts. Now, many of them were not active, right? And when I first got this assignment, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to reach 7,000 active partners in any kind of meaningful way? I can't scale that. And I had a team of 30 people. That doesn't even make a dent, right? So connecting through LinkedIn was a key part of my strategy, following their company pages, following the solution architects, because they're the ones doing the configs and picking the tech, right? People think it's the salespeople. It's not the salespeople. It's it's the solution. It's the SAs. And, really LinkedIn allows you to amplify your reach if you use it right, in a very genuine and meaningful way. Right. And you can leverage it not just for the company that you're working for, but that's why it's important to have your own brand within that, right? A brand that says integrity or, genuine, etc. Right. An expert in particular technology or security or whatever it might be. Right.
I haven't updated my paper resume since 2008.
Yeah.
I actually just found it recently.
Was it a printed copy?
Yes. Color printed. Had a executive council cloud committee from CompTIA on it. I was like, oh, I remember those days.
Wow.
Yeah. I think also like the big thing too, is there's so many little like networks and communities, right? Like we have the Women in the Channel Leadership Network. You mentioned CompTIA. I think, being involved in associations and leadership networks like this one can really help amplify you. And maybe if you're not ready for that LinkedIn, like I need to get to 10,000 followers, which if you're not following me on LinkedIn, please do, because I'm trying to get to 10,000 followers. Anyway,
me too. Follow me.
If you're not ready for that, like sometimes having these like closer knit communities like the Women in the Channel Leadership Network can help you with that, right? And can give you some practice and building your brand in a little bit more of a controlled setting, and it's channel specific. Correct. So then you can find people who you don't know and then pivot into other places online.
Well, we're getting down to the end of our time here online, but I do want to pivot to kind of our closing thoughts, which is reinvention. And Des, I'm going to start with you on this one because it's been a wild adventure. Reinvention post layoff. The world is your oyster. What are your recommendations?
Put yourself out there, straight up. I was very lucky to have a really large network, and that was, like we've touched on this, the very first thing that I did after throwing a temper tantrum was I posted online and said, like, it was like summer off 2023. This is going to be amazing. I have a really good opportunity. Like, I'm way too positive. So I glass half full. I'm like, I'm going to glass half full this. I'm like, summer off. I'm still going to ChannelCon. I got an awesome opportunity to be on stage on ChannelCon. The conversation was all around mental health, and I was on stage for myself. So I was so proud of myself. And I'm like, that's okay. I can take the summer off and everything will be amazing. But I posted online and said, I can't be bored. I need projects. I need something to do. And so Kathleen reached out, and then Apportio Technologies, I do fractional work with them. They reached out and they said, can you help us with this? And there was just so many different people that reached out and said, and not all of them worked. Like there was a lot of meetings that they were like, okay, we'll review, we'll talk about it later, we'll figure it out, and never went anywhere. And I was totally fine, but because it also just helped with my mental health a lot because I was able to go into conversations with people where I would say, I would spend an hour and a half with them and they'd be like, oh my God, this was such a great conversation. You've given us so much information. I'm like, okay, I am still smart. It is still there. And then I would say that the biggest thing that I did is I made sure to lean on my network and the community around me, and not just because like at home I have my other half, Trevor, and I can be a lot. So him leaning and me just leaning on him and being home all the time, that's a lot. So I had to make sure to lean on Kathleen, lean on like Christine Gassman, lean on like there's so Ola is amazing. There's so many people that I made a point to reach out to them and let them know that I was struggling. This is hard. I need help. And whether that be help with a project, help with getting me out of the house, help with Des, you're not crazy. You didn't lose value just because you lost your job. Because that was like a
Mhm.
huge thing in my head. Because I'm like, well, if no one's hiring me, then clearly I've lost value. Like that's just the way it is. But taking all of those things in stride, I would yell at myself and say, like, what is it? The saying, if it's not worked out at the end, it's not the end yet. It'll all work out in the end.
Yeah.
It's repeated on my head, and I would have a job opportunity, and I'd have a contract in hand, and then the Monday after the contract would be moved to another headcount, and I'd be like, oh, okay, this is cool. And that happened a lot. But because of the conversations and having active conversations, and because I was still picking up projects and I was still doing things, there was still a positive momentum that even when things got like, I don't know, I don't know if this is the proper term, but like kneecapped, I'd feel like the carpet was being pulled out beneath me. I thought I'd have a job and it would be gone the next second. I'd be like, okay, because of all those things, I was able to get out of the hole faster and keep the positive momentum. And then when the right job popped up, it was literally, I was having lunch with someone who was like, do you know that this person just moved and might be hiring? And I said, no, I had no idea that person moved and might be hiring. And I sent a text message and he said, I'll have a contract to you at the end of the day.
Oof.
That was one conversation and it
Love that.
changed everything. Like, so it's a really powerful things that can happen, and it can be a really hard thing. But I know we talked about networking and community and all those things. I think that networking and community and keeping yourself positive are powerful, powerful things.
Yeah.
I had go ahead.
I was going to throw in my 2 cents on the topic with a real world example. So in one of my first layoffs, I worked for big box retail, Computer City, back in the late 90s.
When
I don't
they
know if you
existed,
remember
yes.
those
Uh-huh.
guys, right?
Mhm.
So we got bought out, and then I got laid off, and I was like, "Holy crap! What do I do now?" And it was my innate curiosity that made me want to learn, like, why is this store here? Where are these computers coming from? Why are people buying them? What's going on? Like, what is happening around me? And I needed to understand that. And when I started to discover this part of the space called distribution at the time, back when it was Maricel and EMJ
gosh.
and Ingram Micro, I was like, wow, this is where this store gets all these computers from. Holy, like, who are these companies? And I applied, and I was like, well, this sounds fun because I love computers. I was a nerd. I was playing around back in the late 80s, early 90s, that sort of stuff. That's why I loved that retail job to begin with. And then I discovered distribution, and I applied for a job, and I got the interview in 5 minutes. And I don't know if you'll remember the website Job Shark. Anybody ring a bell? Job Shark?
Yeah.
So I posted on Job Shark that who I was, what I was looking for, and immediately got the response from the hiring manager at Maricel. So I got a job at Maricel because of the experience of not only working with computers but working with people. Right. So that was completely directly transferable to that first distribution role that I had as essentially a frontline, as my first like telephone sitting in a cubicle job kind of thing. Right. And then when Cinex bought us out, I got laid off and wanted to learn where are these distributors getting their stuff from? Who's IBM? What's AST? What is Packard Bell? What is NEC? And I'm giving you all the hilarious old computer hardware names.
Yeah.
And then when I learned that, I was like, oh my gosh, there's all these vendors and these computer companies and software companies. And that's when I first started working with Dan Wensley. It was back in 2002. And so it's just amazing how this skill set that I inadvertently fell into, frankly, turned out was very transferable in a way that I was able to, snowball my career progressively and positively through the, 25 plus years I've been doing this now. So yeah, the point of know what you're doing, document the things you know how to do, understand why you're doing what you do, and then discover that all of that activity could probably be transferable to not just other companies, but potentially other industries as well. You never know.
Yeah.
A survival skill that I recommend for everyone is to have a bounce back buddy, right? And Des basically is what she was explaining, right? I had these 2 people specifically that I would meet with every week. They were my bounce back buddies. They were also laid off. They would give me tips and tricks on resumes, what they were seeing. We would watch out for things for each other. Maybe it wasn't right for them, but it was right for me, right? And keeping that routine of just talking to someone every week about what brainstorming about what step to take next, not to get together to just cry and commiserate, but really to productively discuss and brainstorm. You can cry and commiserate as well, but talk about how do I bounce back, right? And how can I help you bounce back? And to the point, maybe you know someone that knows someone that knows someone, right? So that would be the closing tip that I would leave everyone with, for sure.
All right, Cass, we're closing out with you here.
I am going to kind of go in this different direction. I'm going to say, don't be afraid to pivot. My last layoff, and I'll just tell the story very quickly. It was during the pandemic. Me and my friends were like, we got to get out of here. We got to get away from these kids, y'all. So we packed up. I had taken a day off. We packed up our cars. We actually drove from Texas to Florida, and we ended up like just hanging out on the beach. And my then boss called and was like, wanted a random phone call. And I was like, y'all, I'm getting laid off. I decided that then and there, I'm like, I'm going to just take a chance and I'm going to see what my other options are. And I was like, I always wanted to get a master's degree. I always wanted to do inclusion. I've always been in ERGs and all the things, but I just wanted to do the equity and inclusion thing full stop. Like that, I was like, this is where I need to be moving and going. So that happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I got laid off on a Thursday. By Monday, I had written my purpose statement. I had gotten my transcript sent over to the University of Oklahoma. I filled out my application. That next Friday, I was accepted. And the Monday after that, I started classes. I just was like all in. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to change and do what I actually really truly am passionate about and really wanting to do. And fast forward to now, I'm in an industry that is so great, that there's so many amazing people. I'm happier. I'm like, just my whole life is better, but I used it as an opportunity to pivot into something brand new and to take a risk. And I think if I hadn't done it then, I don't think I would have ever done it. I would have continued to just like be in events and like, that's what I've always done. And that's what I'm good at. And now I've taken all those skills and moved them into this. And now I know all of you. And so I think there's just so much value in really taking stock of, is this what is my purpose? Am I living my purpose? And it's like, if the answer on any level is no, use it as an opportunity to pivot, like do something bold, do something audacious, like just say, you know what, I'm going to throw it up and like keep moving, right? Be practical and pragmatic. Like you got to pay your bills, but at the same time, like use it as an opportunity to do something different, because you never know where your life is going to end up 2-3 years later.
So with all of that, I want to thank every one of you for being on this panel today. And I want to invite everybody to continue the conversation with us. You can join us at the ALN Network at aln.network. You can join us on Instagram, Facebook, X, or LinkedIn. And I'm sorry, folks, I'm always going to call X Twitter. It just feels weird otherwise. And I want to thank you, Cass, for those final words. I've got to be smart. I've got to be wise. I've got to be pragmatic, but I've got to be audacious too. And the fact that I have the opportunity to be all of those things can be really an exciting opportunity. So whether you are currently going through the storm or you are right on the edge of that storm getting ready to throw and crash a wave over you, I want to encourage you to follow some of the wise words that were shared today, or to connect with any one of us here on LinkedIn and let us continue talking about this and be your accountability bounce back buddy if necessary. So, and if you're ever looking for a topic to share here in the lounge with ALN, Des will tell you all you have to do is ask, and 98.9% of the time, I say yes. So for our next topic, we're going to be talking about what does it really mean to get those marketing dollars in an economy where nobody's giving marketing dollars? And what does that look? So it's kind of an MDF discussion that goes one step further. And I hope all of you will join us for that in a couple of weeks. So Dr. Renee, Cass, Des, Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. And for all of you listening, thank you.
Thank
Cheers,
you as well.
everyone.
Thanks, y'all.